They've said, she's returned to nature, and I'm sitting there, well, whatever that might mean, which there's a huge range, but at least people could be possibly looking for something or being aware. I mean, until you express the possibility, and I know that there was always the expression that's possible that she would be dead, but I think that on the other hand, without the closer you can dial everything in, not that you should just have tunnel vision, but that you have an idea of what to be looking for, the greater it.
Return to nature. That was the official phrase chosen by the Sheriff's Department in Tucson, Arizona, to describe the alleged fate of Nancy Guthrie. It was a phrase dropped into a press release 170 days after she vanished, a clinical euphemism designed to soften the blow of a second letter sent to her family stating she was dead. But language like that doesn't just describe a reality, it constructs one. It builds a wall between the public and the truth. Imagine an hourglass, but instead of sand, it's filled with physical evidence. The moment law enforcement decides to sit on information, the glass is flipped. Every grain that falls to the bottom is a footprint washed away by rain, a shallow grave further obscured by desert scrub, or a memory degrading in a witness's mind. By the time the public is finally told what happened, the top of the hourglass is empty. The scene is gone. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Endless Cryme. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The decision to withhold the contents of that letter for months wasn't just a procedural hiccup. Ed Smart, a man who lived through the 9-month-long televised nightmare of his daughter Elizabeth's abduction, has publicly classified it as a distinct operational failure. He argues that investigators are making a big mistake by treating information like a proprietary secret rather than a tool for public mobilization.
Well, being that she was so aware of this second letter, obviously she knew what it was. I think that this is kind of um, a last reach out to try to engage whoever the captor was to, please let us know where the body is. And, certainly during the time that Elizabeth was gone, we were on this emotional roller coaster, which I'm sure she has been. I have just been amazed at how well she has handled everything. Also felt badly that law enforcement weren't more forthcoming. You can never control the narrative that happens with law enforcement, the FBI, the police, the sheriff's department, whoever your law enforcement is. And, you would think that they were basically doing everything in the best interest and they have their protocols or their procedures to follow. But I think to not have been more forthcoming to the public was a mistake. I think that you, as a parent, or in her case, as a child, you want to bring everything possible to bear on getting the answers that you want. And it's not a matter of whether she's alive or dead. It's a matter of, please just let us know. And so I'm hoping that Savannah, it sounds like at that time they believed that, her mother may have passed, and which I totally understand. And now just wanting to, find her body and get her home to the place that you want her to be settled. I totally understand that. But the ups and downs are this emotional roller coaster that, it's just like it's out of control. You get to a point where you just kind of protect your emotions because it is so up and down and all over the place that it's exhausting. It's an emotional wreck, and so the not knowing is the worst part. I headed up a group called the Surviving Parents Coalition, and in that group we had parents who. A few of us were fortunate to have our child come home. Many of them did not know. They're still in this state of not knowing, which is where Savannah and her family currently are. And then there are those that absolutely know that their child or their parent is deceased. And so it's a there's such a wide range of emotion that goes with that, but it's hard to watch the struggle. I think that whether your child's returned to you or whether you know that they're dead, that's a certainty. And the not knowing, which even in the fact, well, there's no fact about it, but in the situation where they believe that she may be deceased, the not knowing and the total confirmation that that is the case is something that I feel is really important to any family. And I believe that's where um, Savannah and her family are at the moment. So, I totally feel that it's kind of like a wound. You, depending on how big that wound is, and losing a child or a parent is huge. I mean, they're such a big, important part of your life. And when they're missing, it's like you've been wounded, and this wound just stays there and kind of bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. And how do you close that wound up? How do you bring a closing to it? I watched, several parents in my group that still didn't have the answers that they wanted. And our effort was to try to, protect children and to put forward legislation that would protect and help change the dynamic that's currently happening. The amber alert, the silver alert that's been out there, bringing to bear, there are CART teams, which stands for Child Abduction Response Team, that came about following Elizabeth's return. And they certainly have a number of protocols that they follow, because it's really a matter of the process of elimination, getting to finding your family member. So being able to draw on all of the information out there and the help that is available. I think keeping the public engaged is hugely important. And I think I think that there might have been answers sooner if they had been more public with the fact that they believed that she was deceased, instead of allowing it to go on for this long.
The hard legal reality is that law enforcement has a dual mandate: preserve the integrity of the investigation, but also leverage the 64 million eyeballs in this country to generate leads. When you translate the legalese of the Pima County Sheriff's Procedural Handbook, you get a simple rule: hold back the murder weapon, release the threat landscape. If you have a specific detail that only the killer would know, you sit on it. If you have confirmation that a missing woman is deceased and her body is out there in the Tucson desert, you don't dress that fact up in poetic metaphor 5 months later. This is where the gap between official statement and operational reality becomes a chasm. The Sheriff's Department maintained for months that they were exploring all possibilities, that the investigation was fluid, and that they needed to protect the integrity of the file. They spoke in long, bureaucratic sentences about exhaustive searches and following protocols, but they held a letter that fundamentally altered the nature of the search. That's not a procedural safeguard. That's a catastrophic misallocation of resources. Ed Smart's criticism cuts directly to a structural hypocrisy that plagues high-profile missing person cases: the reliance on the public for tips while simultaneously keeping the public blind to the most critical piece of data, whether they are looking for a living person or a corpse.
And, it's always hard to try and second guess what another person is going through. You may have almost identical situations, but everyone handles things differently. So I would hate to be critical there. But as far as law enforcement goes, they're always concerned about releasing information that, for example, in our situation, Richard Reese was the main suspect, and they'd put a lot of work into trying to track him down, what he had been doing, what his cohorts might be up to. And they basically said to us, um, if you go out with this information right now, you're going to destroy all the work that we've been doing. And I can appreciate that. But in our situation where, Mary Catherine came forward and said, I think it's so and so. And, you know, for her to be able to come forward with that was huge. And we'd been hoping and waiting for that day. In Nancy's situation, where these letters came forward and the family was made aware, I just feel like it was a mistake not to be straight out. I, heard so many conspiracy theorists and people saying, "Oh, well, they're probably just doing this for attention." And I'm sitting there, for anyone who hasn't gone through this experience, no, there's no way you would ever choose to go through this. You know, you're you just have the wrong idea and don't know the pain that one goes through when you've lost a family member. So anyway, I feel that, moving forward, I'm glad that they finally have come forward the way they have. And I hope that they can, have somebody come forward. Of course, at this point, if her body has been buried in the desert, decomposition, whether, animals, there are so many possibilities. The sooner the information could have come out, the sooner people could have been looking for her. And so I feel like uh, it's a hard call. It's really a problem, but I think that law enforcement need to be more open with the public sooner rather than thinking that they can hold things back. Because the more I've found that the public, I mean, sure, you get a lot of people that, you know, whether they're psychics or whatever, will come forward with ideas, and people have different ideas. But for the most part, I believe that people want to help. In Elizabeth's case, I felt overwhelmed. It gave me the greatest hope to see people wanting to help and being out there searching. We had so many people that donated and tried to help in the cause. It was huge, and I think that Savannah has seen the outpouring of love and the wanting to care. What can we do? How can we, find Nancy? Is something that, of course, is very important. And I think the more open we can be on these cases, the better chance that answers are going to happen, that people will be looking for the right thing, and possibly, those answers will come home to the family.
The search for a hostage looks nothing like the search for a grave. By keeping the public on a leash, the investigators weren't protecting the case, they were unknowingly bleaching it. Information is not evidence until the public can act on it. This brings us to the parallel narrative, the structural DNA of tragedy that links Salt Lake City 2002 to Tucson 2026. Ed Smart revealed that the Salt Lake City police sat on his daughter Mary Catherine's identification of the suspect, Emmanuel, for months. They treated a breakthrough as a hunch to be validated internally rather than a lead to be exploded externally.
At some point in time, you have to make decisions. For example, when Mary Catherine came forward and said, "I think I know who it is," we went through. She was debriefed and talked to a couple of times. They did not accept because she said, "I think, I don't know." Then they discarded it to a point. And we held that information back, not wanting to, um, we wanted to allow police to do all that they could, but there is only so much time that should be allowed for that. And at a point in time, you've got to say, okay, this is what's come forward. For example, when we put that picture out and said, we think Mary Catherine came forward with this, and we're trying to share it with the public. That was essentially um, 4 months after the fact. And if I could have gone back, I would have said, okay, we've got a month to finish up whatever it is you're doing, and then we need to go public with this because this is significant. Looking back on it, it wasn't until, Elizabeth and Mitchell and Wanda Barzee basically came back to Salt Lake that, they were spotted. But that position of spotting them, if that could have happened 4 months earlier, how great would that have been?
Mm.
So I think that
The result was a delay that possibly cost Elizabeth 9 months of captivity. Ed articulates a specific mechanism of failure, the clearance vacuum. When law enforcement fails to clear the family quickly and transparently, the public fills that vacuum with conspiracy. The Smart family was shredded online and in back-channel rumors simply because the police wouldn't state the obvious. They were ruled out.
You experienced that a little, didn't you? Like, weren't people pointing the
absolutely.
finger at you?
Absolutely. They not only I felt like I was finally cleared, but my older brother, who basically put his heart and soul into helping us find Elizabeth, he the finger kept getting pointed to him. And I think that, that's a natural thing. Law enforcement have to basically get in there, and they should be able to clear the family. And the sooner that's cleared, the fewer conspiracy theories come about, and the better the focus can be made on finding the family member. I mean, in our situation where Elizabeth was gone for so long and law enforcement did not clear the whole family, that clearing could have happened so quickly. I mean, my brothers or sisters were with their spouses at home in bed that night.
Mm.
There wasn't any chance that they had snuck out and taken her at 2 a.m. So, that could have been cleared, and that should have been over with. But it did not. It just drug on, and finally.
We see the same rot spreading in the Nancy Guthrie case. A brother-in-law, a sister, peripheral figures who have no evidence tying them to the disappearance. Yet they exist in a purgatory of suspicion because the sheriff's office allows the ambiguity to fester. Ed Smart's warning is precise. It isn't just about finding the body. It's about preventing the second crime, which is the destruction of the surviving family's reputation through investigative inertia. The hard evidence of the chronology makes the sheriff's position indefensible. According to the timeline confirmed in the public record, the critical second letter was received by the family shortly after Nancy's disappearance. That's not a rumor, that's a stated fact from the family's own representation. Law enforcement chose to clamp down on this. We are not talking about a week of silence. We are talking about a quarter of a year. In those months, the monsoon rains hit Pima County. The desert floor shifted. Scavengers followed their natural cycles. The most crucial element in any missing person case is temporal proximity. When a person vanishes on a specific day, the public's memory is a sharp snapshot. 6 months later, the memory of a truck on a dirt road isn't a snapshot anymore, it's an impressionist painting. By releasing the return to nature line as a delayed rhetorical device instead of an immediate actionable alert, the department shifted the public's role from active search partners to passive consumers of a mystery narrative. Information is not evidence until the public can act on it. The national security and consequence angle here isn't about foreign threats, it's about the domestic erosion of trust that makes policing impossible. When a public information officer stands at a podium and constructs a phrase like, return to nature, to avoid saying, we believe she was murdered and we have an admission in writing, they are deploying a linguistic shield that has a lifespan. The shield eventually rusts. At what point does the withholding of a death declaration cross from investigative prudence into obstruction of justice by institutional vanity? It's the ticking clock moment that reframes this from a sad headline to a forensic thriller. If the public had known on day 10 that evidence pointed to a fatality, would a hiker have taken a different trail? Would a hunter have checked a different ridge? That's not a rhetorical question for the family, it's a legal liability question for the county. The damage isn't just emotional. It's an evidentiary chain that has been allowed to decompose in the open air because the gatekeepers of the information confused secrecy with wisdom. Ed Smart's final diagnosis of the situation is surgical. He points directly to the necessity of a private investigator
to contact Savannah and ask her to, potentially have a private eye look at the whole situation and, try to come up with a better idea, or what has not been looked at properly.
So
We all have.
you think she should get a private eye?
Well, I don't know at this point, but I would have started at
Mm,
least a month in to, try to push that forward. I don't know all that Savannah has been told and her family has been told. So it's hard for me to, I mean, I'm giving my idea, my thought, and what I learned from our case and what I've seen in so many other cases is that the information is held too closely to the vest, so to speak, and that it needs to be put out there so that the public are giving the best direction they can to their efforts if they're out looking or if they've seen something. The closer it comes to the time, for example, if that second letter came, I think it was the second week of the abduction, and if that had come out, somebody potentially might have seen her being buried if
mm.
that was the case. And over time, your memory, creates stories and all sorts of things. So the information that the
An outside force immune to the chain of command that choked the information flow. He notes that waiting for an agency to green light transparency is a gamble with a losing historical record. The moral refrain of this entire procedural disaster is unavoidable. The truth delayed is the truth decayed. That isn't a slogan. That is a biological reality for forensic evidence. The refusal to immediately pivot the public's attention from a rescue mission to a recovery mission isn't a minor mistake. It is the fundamental mistake that turns a solvable case into a permanent archive. It locks the family into the not knowing. The state Ed Smart describes as a wound that just keeps bleeding.
Like it'd be a very uncomfortable feeling, like.
It is very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable, not only from the standpoint of law enforcement, but your spouse, I mean, Lois and I mean, at one point, law enforcement told Lois that they didn't think I was telling the truth. And, that certainly caused problems between us. And I felt like it was so important to basically clear ourselves, do whatever it took, whether it was a polygraph, whether it was going down to the police station and saying, what is it that you're thinking I'm hiding? I mean, I remember one day as I was trying to catch up with Lois, and she was she was taking the kids down to get a couple of dogs for us. And I said I wanted to come down and help. So I got down there, and she had this big hat on and these glasses, and I saw these tears coming down her face, and that just, broke me up inside. And I said, Lois, what is it? And she said, law enforcement think that you're not telling the truth. And so I finally said, I am going down there right now. I'm answering whatever questions they have, and I won't be coming home until you receive a phone call from the police and they're telling you that they don't believe that I've been involved, because I haven't. I have nothing to do with this. So that is problematic. and but in many cases it is the family. So it's not something that you can just disregard, but it can be.
You can't start that healing on a law enforcement timetable. You start it with radical, immediate transparency. Information is not evidence until the public can act on it. We need to look at the primary source material ourselves. The problem isn't hidden in a sealed affidavit. It's visible in the public relations strategy. I'm directing you to look at the Pima County Sheriff's Department official news releases from the first 90 days of the Nancy Guthrie investigation, archived on the department's Gov website. Read the sanitized language. Count the days between the family's receipt of the letter and the department's confirmation to the press. Then ask yourself the question that changes the entire legal posture of this case. If you subtract those days of delay, was there a window of time where weather conditions, satellite imagery, or witness memory were still intact enough to locate Nancy, and did the state's withholding of information permanently close that window? Go find that timeline. I want to see the hourglass calculation in the comments. Thank you for watching Endless Cryme. If you believe sunlight is the best disinfectant for a stalled investigation, like this video, share it, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We don't do speculation, we do the paperwork.